Hey guys, welcome back to Rag HQ. This video is going to be based on a deck profile based around an updated version of Melony Rapid Strike Urshifu. And while I go through card for card, I'm going to explain why I have these card choices, as well as why I made some minor changes and what I think how it stands in the current meta as of 3/22/22. Let's get started. So right now I'm still using 3 Urshifu VMAXs. This card is pretty phenomenal for this deck. I tried cutting it a little bit shorter to 2 Urshifu VMAXs so I can put in stuff like Inteleon VMAX, but honestly it kind of felt a little too clunky and tight doing that. So I figured might as well just stick with the consistent build where it just rocks the 3. To go along with them, I am using 4 Urshifu Vs. I think this is a pretty good lineup. Makes it very easy to get into either the VMAX or the V if you want to attack into an Arceus V-Star with 100 Furious Blows. I think this is a pretty solid ratio against anything that's not a Mew deck. And I built the rest of this deck to deal with just Arceus and any other deck that isn't Mew. So moving on to the support engine, I am running 4 Sobble. This card is still amazing for the deck. If you go second using its Keep Calling attack, you can get any Pokemon that says Rapid Strike Pokemon or Rapid Strike in the top right corner, which is pretty good to put an Urshifu V on the bench, as well as other Sobbles. And to go with it, I am still using 4 Drizzle. It's a very good card, just get any trainer. Like, it's pretty much the bread and butter for the rest of this deck. And then the combo with the Drizzles, I am using a 2-1 ratio like last time. This just sets up so much plays with Rapid Flow, Gale Thrusts, as well as a nice little tech that's still in this deck. And this comes up occasionally. Whenever it does come up, it is super clutch, but it's a pretty good card. I tried using Scoop Up Net instead of this guy, so that way I could scoop up net a Drizzle and have a Drizzle for next turn, but overall I kind of like the Inteleon just a tad more. So to go along with that, I am using 2 Artillery and 2 Remoraid. This just feels so good to go with the Shady Dealings. This can typically you want to get a Rapid Strike energy with this card because that's something that the Shady Dealings cannot get. But a lot of the times you can draw into the Rapid Strike energy based on all your draw cards and all your search cards anyway. So even if you don't use him to get only the energy, he's good to get other cards. Between the Shady Dealings and this, you get access to pretty much anything in your entire deck. So then to help get the sequencing correctly, I am still using 1 Crobat V. There are a few times where you need at least 3 cards based on your game plan for one specific turn. And a lot of times Artillery and Drizzle are going to be your main lineups per turn. So it helps to just Crobat first to see if you can get one of those 3 cards. So that way the Drizzle and the Artillery can get the rest of your cards after you draw. Really helps. And then I am still using the Medicham V. Now when I originally used Medicham V, this was back before Brilliant Stars. And the original game plan was to Rapid Flow on Genesect, Quick Shoot, and Yoga Loop. And if you do it correctly, you'd be able to win after they take out your VMAX and whatever Pokemon you start off with in the active. But now that Mew is this fast, and Urshifu really didn't get too much faster. It got Ultra Ball, which helps, but it didn't get a serious boost, whereas Mew did. So I really thought about what would be any reason to keep the Medicham Vs. And I noticed a lot of decks that are small, such as Malamar and Durant, they really enjoy having their Manaphy's. So this really helps to punish those decks that use Manaphy, because a cute play you can do is quick shoot once on a Manaphy, so it's at 50 HP, and then leave that Manaphy alone with your other quick shooters if you have any. Gale Thrust if you have to. They're most likely not going to scoop up net a Manaphy that only has 2 damage counters. So that's when you go in with the next turn where you quick shoot twice, because that's pretty reasonable to happen. Then you use your artillery to set up a Medicham V with a Yoga Loop play, which allows you to just knock out the Manaphy, and then you just get an additional turn. I don't think it's that uncommon, to be honest. I played against a Malamar deck in a best of 3. Went by tournament rules, so it was 50 minutes. And I Yoga Looped him twice in one game. So the match ended in a draw, because he got game 1, I got game 2. The only real reason that I lost game 1 was because I could not get to the Medicham V. It was in my prizes. So then I thought, all right, that was fun and all. And, you know, it's the same concept against Durant Mill. They'll put out the Manaphy, hope they can, you know, keep your rapid flows at bay. But, you know, with this one Medicham V Yoga Loop play, you can end up getting 3 prizes. And it's technically 2 turns, but it feels like one long turn anyway. And you spread quick shoots. So aside from those 2 decks, I was really thinking, what's the validity of having a Medicham V? And honestly, I think it's still pretty good, because if you really think about it, in this deck, you're able to get a range of anywhere from 120 to 240 in one turn in order to Yoga Loop. So if you see a Pokemon that's within that range, there's a good chance you can Yoga Loop it. I'm not saying this has to be your main win con, and I don't play this deck to do that, but it does happen quite a bit. It's pretty easy. Like, if you're going against Single Strike, large majority of the time they have Houndours and Houndooms. Well, you can quick shoot twice on the Houndour, Yoga Loop, and then you just get a free turn after that. Or you can set up a Rapid Flow, one on a Houndoom, 120 to something else, and then you can Yoga Loop on your next turn. It's pretty nice. And I was thinking, all right, Single Strike, Malamar, and Durant. What else can we do? So I was thinking, you know, Luminion is showing up here and there in some Arceus decks. I think that's at 170 HP, I think. So you can Yoga Loop that, which I also did recently. I went against an Arceus deck where it featured Galarian Moltres and Galarian Zapdos, and I just Yoga Looped them. And then I ended up taking an additional 4 more prizes, and technically 2 turns, but it felt like one long turn. So you can do it against some Arceus decks. I almost Yoga Loop. I had the chance of Yoga Looping a Duraludon, but the only reason I didn't do it was because I was trying a different build where I had Inteleon VMAX with this, and I had to get my last bear in the prizes. So it came down to I could Yoga Loop, but it doesn't do a whole lot in the specific scenario that I was in. But now this deck is back to its consistent form. You can Yoga Loop those big VMAXs such as Duraludon. So honestly, I think this card's a really good card. I don't Yoga Loop every single match, but every single time that I do Yoga Loop, I win about 9 out of 10 of those games. It's pretty good. So then moving on to the supporters, I am using 2 Research, 2 Marnie, 3 Melony, a Rhyhorn, and a Boss. I think because it's a Melony build, 3 is a pretty solid number. I never tried 2. I did try 4, but 4 felt like way too much because I don't want to see it in my opening hand. And I never really had a problem with having 3. Like, even if 1 was in my opening hand and I had to discard it, I still had 2 to work with. So I think 3 is a solid number. 2 Research, 2 Marnie, because it is nice to have a supporter on your first turn if you're going second. So that way you can just churn through your deck and you have the option of either discarding some cards that you don't really care about or conserving them. And a lot of times you're going to be Gale Thrusting anyway later on, so you don't have to Melony. So being able to reduce the hand size a bit or to extend your hand so that way you can set up for future plays is a pretty solid way of pretty solid reason to having these 4 copies. And I did try this deck without Rhyhorn, but it felt really naked and weird without it. It is doable, but you know, now that I'm back playing with Rhyhorn, I am not taking this card out. It's just so versatile. Like, being able to search any card, including the special energy, so your auxiliaries can get anything else, just opens up your plays so much more. And this card, you know, boss is boss, but in this kind of deck where you can rapid flow for 150 to the bench, it makes it more interesting for your opponent, because let's say they're trying to play around a 150 rapid flow, you can just boss something to the front, like you can boss stall, and then you can do 150 to the back. So that if they want to attack, they're going to have to get rid of the boss stall play by like switching, and they're bringing up something weaker. So this card is a little more versatile than in other decks, and I really like it. I think you can get away without it, but like I said, those plays kind of happen enough, and being able to force your opponent to use some of their resources just to get rid of a boss stall is pretty nice. And then obviously just do the normal boss plays. So then after that, I am running 4 Quick Ball, 4 Level Ball, 2 Incense, and 1 Ultra Ball. I was playing 2 Ultra Ball, but as you can see, this is going to be one of the first changes I did. The deck was fine without Ultra Ball, but I still think Ultra Ball is a pretty good card in this deck because it's another way of discarding your waters. And it gets any Pokemon, so it's pretty good. But I do like having 2 Incense over 2 Ultra Ball in this deck because for your sequencing, a lot of the times, there are enough times where you're going to need 3 or more cards. And just being able to hold this card without discarding cards that you might need later on is it's a pretty good way of conserving cards. Like let's say you have Crobat, you have this card, and you need to get to a rapid flow. You could probably Octillery and use this to get a Shady Dealings. Or you can use Octillery to search and use Shady Dealings, but most of the time you're going to want to either draw cards first, or you want to get this to get to the Shady Dealings first, and then draw, and then Octillery after. So this card is very flexible, almost as flexible as Ultra Ball. In some scenarios it's better, kind of like the scenario I just gave out. Whereas if you had Ultra Ball, sure, you're going to draw more cards with Crobat, but some of those cards you might need to change your game plan, like say you can't Rapid Flow. What you can do instead is just set up a Yoga Play turn, or you can set up a really strong Gale Thrust turn. So I think 2 is pretty good. And then 4/4, for obvious reasons. This discards waters and get any basic. And this gets you any Remoraid, Sobble, or Drizzle. So it's a good card to get you out of dead hands consistently. And also to set up your board. So then moving on, I am using 2 energy searches. I am using a split between basic energies, so having an energy search to find either the fighting or the water is significantly better when doing this kind of strategy. I don't think running 3 water or 4 water and no basic fighting is good unless you just accept the loss against the Ralladon. And this build is, honestly, I don't think Rapid Strike Urshifu holds a candle to Mew VMAX. Like, not even the old Rapid Flow Yoga plays are going to consistently work. So you may as well make sure you can at least get the fighting energy so you can deal with the Ralladon VMAX. So then, moving on past that, these are my pivot cards. I did originally have Escape Rope, but now that Duraludon VMAX is one of the big contenders, it doesn't feel good Escape Roping the VMAX to the back. So I'd rather just switch if I have to get into the Duraludon. And I don't really miss having 2 switches, 2 ropes, or a mix of both. I think one with these 2 is perfectly fine. You don't really get stuck that often because the large majority of cards are Rapid Strike Pokemon anyway. And the only card that isn't, or the only 2 cards that aren't, would be your Inteleon as well as your Crobat, and that's just 1 attachment. And you can just combo that with Water, Retreat, Melony play anyway, so it's not a big deal. And this card is highly searchable because not only is it a trainer, but it's a Rapid Strike card. So your Octilleries and your Shady Dealings and all your other cards that can find those specific cards can find this. So, pretty good. I think 4 is way too much. I think 3 is a little high. And 1 is definitely not enough. This always felt like a pretty good number. And the benefit is, even if they bump one of these stadiums, because you're a Melony deck, you can reliably Rapid Flow anyway, so you're not forced to constantly Gale Thrust. So then I am moving on to the damage modifiers. Choice Belt and Telescopic Sight. These cards are great because, well, I mean, Telescopic Sight speaks for itself. 150 to 2 Vs on the bench. Pretty solid, pretty standard. But this card, I say this is even more flexible than this Telescopic Sight because, for one thing, you can Gale Thrust for 180 now, which is amazing. 1 attachment, 180. That means if you just follow up with a regular Gale Thrust for 150, that is a KO on large majority of VMAXs. And it also extends your ceiling output, so you can Gale Thrust for 180, then you can Quick Shoot, Gale Thrust for 150. So 180 plus 170 is 350. And that's assuming you don't have 2 Quick Shooters. So 350 hits just about anything. It's pretty good. And also a really cute play that I've noticed you can do is you can just Rapid Flow to the front for 150 and 120 to the back if you have to. That's actually like a pretty solid play because then it's like a Gale Thrust and then you hit something else. So there's really no way for your opponent to hide from 150. It's always nice to be able to just pressure anywhere on the board with a significant amount of damage. So I'm not taking this card out. I think this card is too good. And then for the new tech, I am using 1 Echoing Horn. Now this card is mainly for the Duraludon Arceus matchup because it's easy to deal with 1 Arceus V-Star. Kind of a pain to deal with a Duraludon VMAX, but it is doable. But once you get past that Duraludon VMAX, you now have 1 prize to deal with. And most of the time, once you get into that situation, they're only going to have Duraludon VMAX on the board after you deal with the first one. And dealing with 2 is way too hard for this kind of deck. So being able to revive an Arceus just so you can boss it and KO it with either Gale Thrust or Rapid Flow is pretty good. My buddy actually recently did this when I was not playing this deck. And it also leaves some Yoga Loop plays. Like, let's say you're going against a single strike deck, and you got to your board at 2 quick shoots. So that means you can just go Echoing Horn onto a Houndour, quick shoot twice, Yoga Loop, and then that means you can freely do Gale Thrust or Rapid Flow in the following turn, which I gotta tell you, when you Yoga Loop, it's pretty much a game winner. So, and also the nice thing about this tech is it's highly searchable. You can get it with either Shady Dealings or Octillery, and I don't know, it's just a very versatile card. Another neat thing about Echoing Horn is because now that Collapsed Stadium is becoming a bigger stadium, you can actually give your opponent some options to potentially misplay or to feed into your strategy to win the game anyway. So, in case anybody doesn't know what Collapsed Stadium is, it's pretty much a stadium that says both players can only have 4 Pokemon on the bench. If either player has more than 4 Pokemon on the bench, that player must discard Pokemon until they only have 4 on the bench. So what's nice is you can aggressively Echoing Horn something to get them to 4 Pokemon. And if they have Collapsed Stadium, now they are forced to have those Pokemon, which can make it a lot harder, depending on the matchup, for them to continuously attack you. Or you're able to, if they don't have the stadium or if you bumped it, you can Echoing Horn them to 4 Pokemon on the bench to give them the option of either they can put another Pokemon down in order to play Collapsed Stadium to get rid of that Pokemon, or they can accept the fact that that's going to be their board state, and then it'll be awkward for them, and then you can take advantage of that with your Yoga Loops, your Quick Shoots, your Rapid Flows, etc. So depending on the situation as well as your game plan, this can be a versatile card to get your opponent to misplay on top of dealing with Duraludon Arceus. So now moving on to the energies. I am still using 4, despite the fact that Duraludon is here. It doesn't change the fact that this is a very good card to begin with, and it does well in any other matchup that is a Mew anyway. So might as well just take advantage of what your deck does best, which is 2 attachments to do either Gale Thrust or Rapid Flow. And it's highly searchable with Octillery. Well, I wouldn't say highly, but it is searchable with Octillery. And then I am doing a split between 2 water, 2 fighting. Now, it is a little controversial to a lot of players to have any less than 4 water for Rapid Strike Urshifu featuring Melony, but now that Duraludon is here, if you only rely on water and the special energies, now you're accepting a loss against Mew VMAX and Duraludon, which means you're only going to do well against anything that isn't those 2 decks. And sure, like, you might be able to get away with that, but there are so many Mew decks that if you get knocked down, there's a good chance you're going to go against a Duraludon anyway. So, might as well make a manageable matchup become a winnable matchup. And also, I don't really miss having 3 water or even 4 water, because you only really need 1 to continue to do the Melony farm for 1 energy anyway, because you're going to constantly Rapid Flow. So it is a little bit noticeable, but it's very negligible. I will say that. It's very negligible. But if you want to make it a little more consistent with the Melony plays, by all means, use 3 or 4. But if you do that, then you're going to either have to bump up the fighting somehow by getting rid of your other techs or your consistency cards. But 8 energies has always been a very solid number for this deck anyway. Might as well just stick with that formula. And if both of these were to get prized, even though that's pretty unlikely to happen, it's not a big deal to do what the deck normally did, which was attach a Fighting, Gale Thrust, then attach a Rapid Strike energy and Rapid Flow. I mean, that's kind of what the deck did anyway. And also 2 fighting is kind of like 3 fighting in a way, because you have Raihan. So now you can consistently Gale Thrust for KOs on the Duraludon VMAX, as well as you can consistently Gale Thrust on anything really, but especially Arceus V-Star, without relying on Octillery to find only the special energy. And doing this also frees up your Octillery searches anyway. So now you can, set up your hand in a way that you can set up the rest of your turns and your game in the way you want it to play out. So I like the flexibility of a 2-2 line, and I don't really miss having multiple energies of water type. So my overall thoughts on this deck is that it's very solid, but the problem is that Mew VMAX is still a very dominant deck, and as long as Mew sees majority of play, I don't think this deck is good enough to take to a regional. I don't like saying that, but honestly, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, how many Mew matchups will you see? Because if you go against an Arceus box, even if they do have Hoopa V that is both Dark and Psychic, it is not a terrible matchup by any means. Actually, this deck has a pretty solid matchup against Arceus in general. Even the Duraludon matchup now with this new build. But the problem, again, is just Mew. Like, it's so fast. The energies prevent quick shoots. Some of them are rocking Oricorio, so it makes it even harder to do the normal Rapid Flow Yoga Loop combo on the Genesix. So, unless something changes, I don't think the Melony build is the way to go. If Rapid Strike Urshifu can't even contend with it, with the meta, again, like I said, it's good against just about anything except for Mew VMAX. So take that as you will. Still very fun, very consistent, and competitive against everything else. Thanks for watching.